Good morning. It's December 8th, 2021, and we're all gathered here for What Do We Know? A discussion of key data related to the front door of New York City's child welfare system and lessons learned from the pandemic-related reduction in family surveillance. My name is Angela Burton, and I'm a member of the New York City Narrowing the Front Door Working Group. And I, along with my colleagues, Hope Lizette Newton and Erica Francois, also members of the group, will be welcoming you to the meeting. Just a couple of housekeeping notices. We are recording the sessions, only the full group sessions. We are also going to be having a breakout session, which will not be recorded in order to support maximum community contributions and input during that small group. So we will be recording the main sessions as well as the speaker. The New York City Narrowing the Front Door Work Group has come together to spark truth-telling dialogue that refutes the child welfare system's binary narrative that demonizes parents, particularly Black parents, as uncaring at best and violent at worst, while painting child welfare agents and family court judges as the good guys, doing God's work of saving children, or perhaps more dangerously, as just hardworking, ordinary folks just doing their jobs. We, the working group, explicitly affirm that Black families matter and that Black parents are more than capable of raising their children without family policing or family regulation system surveillance and oversight. The work group intends to shift the focus from the self-serving and self-perpetuating false narratives by providing a solution-focused forum for authentic, transparent, and respectful collective engagement. We will leverage all available power, privilege, and influence to clear space in which youth, parents, and communities directly impacted by the family regulation system can more fully exercise their power to hold government accountable and to lead the way in creating a truly caring, supportive approach to child and family well-being in New York City. Hope?
The prevailing focus on child protection and its corresponding punitive approach to families not only demonizes and criminalizes parents, it disrupts and destabilizes intact families. It puts the very children it claims to protect on a path to failure in school, becoming involved in juvenile justice and adult injustice systems, generational child welfare involvement, and other horrendous experiences and outcomes associated with child welfare involvement. The first session of the Narrowing the Front Door offers an opportunity to learn from what did and did not happen during the COVID-19 pandemic, and to lay the foundation for necessary changes in how we care for children, families, and each other. As you will hear today, emerging data further dispels decades-long beliefs about child welfare as government intervention that protects children from harm. Until child welfare involvement is considered an adverse childhood effect, ACEs, and there is a comprehensive, transparent reckoning with the harm the system perpetuates, the children in state protective custody and children that are returned to their families will continue to experience the predictably devastating effects of child welfare system involvement. Narrowing the Front Door will have just been an exercise in futility. Erica?
Thank you. Hope and Angela, that was beautiful. So hello everyone, my name is Erica Francois and I'm the Fair Futures Youth Advisory Board Coordinator. The main goal of the Narrowing the Front Door series is to have collective, courageous conversations and contributions from each session to support a pathway forward for narrowing the front door. We want to prioritize the cultural, educational, and environmental experiences families of color have faced during the pandemic, but most importantly, Black families. Throughout, we will center and respect the voices of directly impacted parents and youth in identifying the strengths and resources. We strive to envision and manifest the conditions for strong, thriving, healthy, and happy New York City families and communities. And now I'll be passing it back over to Anne to lead the rest of the way. Thank you all for joining.
Good morning. Thank you, Erica. I'm Ann Williams-Isom. I'm the James Dumpson Chair at Fordham University Graduate School of Social Services. I wanted to talk to you about something very important this morning, and that's about community care. We care about each other in this Narrowing the Front Door work group, and we care about all of you. And I don't know about you, but I don't know if it's the season that we're in, because the holidays can be hard. I don't know if it's just everything that's going on in this world, but I'm often feel that emotions come up for me. Even when I heard Hope and Angela and Erica this morning, I'm feeling something right now. So what we want to do is we want to be able to recognize when we feel like something is happening for us and take a break. Yesterday, I got a very sad news that one of my relatives in Trinidad and Tobago passed away from COVID. So in the midst of all of my meetings and everything, I had to do another Zoom funeral. And after I just was so moved and so upset, I just stopped. You know what I did? I went out and bought myself 8 poinsettias, and I put poinsettias around my house just to make myself feel better. We don't have poinsettias for all of you today, but what we have is us. We have a care team that's going to be available for you for this 2 hours. It's Hope Newton and myself. And I'm going to hand it over to Chantilly and Rich and Kelly, our great facilitators for the day, so that in case you need a moment, if you just need to talk to somebody, if you just need to be like Ann and Hope, girl, I need to talk to you and have a minute with you, we are here for you. If you need something more serious, we'll connect you with that also. We want to, at the center of this very important conversation is healing. Yes, there are all kinds of feelings, but we want to make sure that we are taking care of each other. So we are so happy today to be able to be here for you and to have a community of care. Thank you and welcome. Kelly, Rich, Chantilly.
Good morning. My name is Rich Rivera, and I'm part of a 4-person team today that are going to make it easy for us to have this wonderful and complex and much needed conversation. I'd like to we're part of a What's Next Now consultant team, and I'd like for my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, happy to be here. I'll be in the background. Have a beautiful meeting.
Kelly?
Hi, everyone. My name is Chantilly. My pronouns are she, her. I am serving as your tech host. So behind the scenes, Rich and Kelly, who are supporting your process, you have, as Angela said, you have a care team. Nancy and I are supporting with some tech, so sharing screens, spotlighting, that kind of thing. But I want to take a minute right now just to orient you to the Zoom space as more people are logging on. So if you're on a desktop, or if you're on a laptop, at the bottom of your screen, there's some really important things. And the most important thing would be like the mute button, right? So you see the microphone. If you see an X on it, you're doing great. And if you're speaking, remember to click that and to unmute. Another important thing that we're going to be using for accessibility is there's closed captions. So there's live transcription. It's not always the most accurate, but if you need it, it's there for you. You should see it at the bottom of your screen, just a square with CC on it. And if you don't see it, click the 3 dots that say more, and then it should pop up and you should see live transcript that you can click on. And at the bottom of your screen, you should see some subtitles. Another thing that's accessible to you as well is the chat. Because this is a large group of us, we want to ask you all to use the chat really mindfully. So it'll support our process if the hosts of the process, like Rich or Kelly or the working group, have access to the chat to make sure you get the information you need to move into different breakouts. But we're going to try our best to keep the chat until there's a Q&A. Rach will be using the chat function then, but try to minimize the chat just so that we have some space to make sure we communicate information to you back and forth. The last thing would be, how do you find us, right? There's 170 people on this call. How do you find us? So I want to direct you to the bottom again of your screen that says participants. And if it's not already on your screen, once you click participants, you see a really long list. But at the very top of your participants list is a search bar. And if you just click the asterisk, you'll see a lot of us on the working group and a lot of us show up. So you should be able to see the care team. So if you're looking for the care team, just click care team on your search bar and Anne and Hope will show up. And if you need some extra tech support, right? Like, oh no, my device, my mute, I don't know, right? I'm on a phone. Sometimes we need a little support. If you click at the participants list and search for tech support, you'll get Matt and Connor, and then they can help you in that way as well, okay? So you have care team, you have tech support, and hopefully there's enough, right? Enough support and care in this room for each other. But so we're going to be moving through this large group, and thank you all again. And then Nancy is also going to be behind the scenes with me. So you'll see Nancy moving in the chat with instructions. Between Nancy and myself, you see us be posting things in the chat. I think that's it for now for me, and we are going to transition.
Thank you. Thank you. So as far as our agenda today, we have a wonderful, elegant, and meaningful agenda. We have an opening with a poem. We have a speaker presentation, a small group conversation following that. There'll be some announcements, and we have a wonderful closing with a poem as well. And we're hearing the voices of the people. Joyce?
Good morning. I'm Joyce McMillan. I am the Executive Director of JMAC for Families and the founder of Planned Parent Legislative Action Network. I would like to take a moment to introduce a wonderful young man by the name of Craig Williams. Craig is an entrepreneur who looks to build relationships with young people like himself who experience the foster care system. He calls himself a musical genius, and because I've seen him perform, I agree. And I'm looking forward to seeing him perform for you guys today. And I'm just asking that you listen very carefully to his rap. It is a lot of his past experience that will be incorporated into that. And he goes by the professional name of 2 Cardiac. With that, let me welcome for you, Craig Williams.
Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well today. Miss Ann, sorry for your loss. Joyce McMillan, thank you so much for the introduction. I hope you guys enjoy these lyrics that I have for you today. We're gonna go right into it, okay? Edwin Gould owned me before I knew what ownership was. There was a plan to groom me for a future of violence and drugs. Void from any of my genuine family, I couldn't identify with love. Moved from space to space. I didn't know what a home was. Grew up in a place where the doors were electric, the doors buzzed. And I'm sitting there like, well, I can't open these doors for, because I'm property of the system where the mission is to get them to die before 21. Where to get them to die before 21 is the mission. The jail cells that is filled with us can't forget to mention. Ironically, they call that detention. I remember having to serve that while in suspension. But you can't get those types of truths from a reverend. I could understand why brothers resorted to the kitchen because they were watching their moms cook and their dads were missing. Now he's pumping that hard rock. They see him as livestock. He got the drugs on the streets that's making their livestock. But if he woke up from the matrix, he's making their job stop. No need for the court, the judge, or a cop. But we sleep, nestled comfortably in our pods, sleep from building our own legacies, but comfortable in the next man's cog. They cool with the submissive tendencies rather than a man fighting against the odds. Machines and chemicals against gods. We can clearly see through the facade. They were aiming at our goddesses. Because if they could get her to fall, then we will all fall after to disaster. It should normally be the family tree, accordingly and enjoyably walking through green pastures. How could we be free if we were told that we were free by the masters? They know one thought could be massive, so they poison the masses and watch the storm that rages through the homes. Children torn from their families by government programs for financial gains. Kids could get lost in the systems. It's a mathematical game. The longer the child's in the system, the more the program obtains. So you see, there's a method to the madness. The people that benefit from these systems and programs are solidifying their children's legacies while we wallow in our sadness. How is our pain their pleasure? We go through the storm as they sit back and just enjoy the weather. That's why we say, fuck ACS. Let's bring our families back together. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe Joyce is introducing the speaker.
Okay.
No, I thought Angela was introducing the speaker.
Okay, Angela's introducing the speaker. Well, first of all, take a minute, right? Like, Craig, absolutely wonderful. I have no words. And I hope everyone really, really listened to every single word, every single transition, every single connection. This is the voice of our youth impacted by the system, telling us what is happening and what is going on. So, I would like to next introduce our speaker, who is going to provide us some baseline information for the question that we have today. What do we know? Professor Anna Ahrens is an assistant professor at the New York University School of Law. And she has written and done research around this issue of what happened during the pandemic, when there was what some people are calling a pause in the New York City child welfare system. Thank you very much for taking this time with us today, Professor Ahrens, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Angela, and thank all of you. It's really an honor to be here today, and I, kind of don't know how I'll follow up Craig, but I will give it a try. So I'm going to share my screen. So one moment here, and then we'll get started. All right, so you should all be able to see that now. So like Angela said, my goal here today is to give us a little bit of information to start from in terms of what this child welfare system, family regulation system is that we have now, and what we can learn from the last year, or I guess at this point I should be saying 2 years, as time continues to move forward during COVID. So I'm going to attempt to do what I think is a little bit impossible, which is to draw what I would call a hopeful message from the COVID crisis that we are in the midst of. And I'm going to be speaking about how the COVID shutdown changed family regulation in the city, and how this period kind of upsets the conventional wisdom that we might be operating under in terms of the efficacy and purpose of the family regulation system. So in brief, over this period of time, if we're looking at from March 2020 up to present, we have a family regulation system that shrunk by almost half at every stage in terms of the number of reports received, the number of investigations undertaken, and the number of children children taken from their families. But we also have now this substantial body of data that shows that despite that, children stay just as safe. And so we have this period where we can now see that children are staying safe, not because of the family regulation system, but in its absence. And we should not discount the fact that in its absence over the last 2 years, we also had this huge upgrowth in mutual aid and in government aid being given to families without the kinds of strings attached or monitoring that we normally associate with, for example, preventive services. So to me, I would argue that this period represents a sort of mini experiment in abolition, a counterpoint to the argument that we can't abolish this system or that we can't imagine a future without the family regulation system. And to that, I would say, you know, we don't have to imagine it. We can just look over the last 18 months and we can see what that might look like or what that might begin to look like in New York City. So to start, I want to spend just a couple minutes talking about what this system looked like before COVID. So if we're going back to March of 2020. So at that point, we were in a period where I think ACS would say that they had, you know, developed this incredibly progressive family regulation system where children weren't being taken from their families at the rates they had been decades ago, or even at the rates they are in other cities. That said, we still had a system where there are 65,000 reports received every year. Most of those reports are coming from mandated reporters, and 25% of all reports are being made by teachers or other school personnel. So if we're going to focus specifically on the level of distress that creates between parents and schools, between parents and these helping institutions, we have mandated reporters as the main body making these reports. We also have, I think unsurprisingly to most people here, many people here, allegations that typically included neglect and not abuse. So all these horror stories that you see in the media about child fatalities or physical abuse or sexual abuse, that's a tiny percent of the reports being received. A full 60% of reports that are received just allege neglect writ very broadly. But if we also include in that beyond neglect, we're including educational neglect, we're including substance use, we are including those other sorts of catch-all forms of neglect, those together constituted about 85% of reports. It also goes without, I think, it bears noting as well that these investigations, even if they don't end up in family court, are incredibly invasive. And even if they don't result in a separation, we have an agent of the state who's entering families' homes, often unannounced in the middle of the night, demanding to see the child's nude body, demanding to look in every cabinet. And it's just, I think, terrifying experience for any person to go through, even if that's the end of it. And for most families, that is the end of it, in that 65% of reports, even before COVID, were not substantiated. So a report is received, someone investigates it, this trauma is induced for this whole family, and then ACS finds no evidence to support the report whatsoever. So if we are now going to jump into, and I guess I also should bear noting who these children are who are being affected by this, who these families are. So if we're looking back at the family regulation system, at each stage from investigation through filing, 90% of reports received are about families who are Black or Latinx, and the vast majority of those, they are hugely disproportionately in neighborhoods that are lower income. So even if we were going to control for poverty, there is still an overrepresentation of poor Black and Latinx families at every stage of the system. So I want to jump ahead now to how this system changed during COVID, and specifically, I will focus in on 3 big changes that happened within the matter of a couple weeks in March 2020. So first was just the shutdown of in-person schooling, which reduced the contact between children and this army of mandated reporters. And this is something that we really saw reflected in the media at the time of all of these narratives of children are going to be locked away at home, out of the eyes of mandated reporters. And I think, you know, we can also see that as a dog whistle it is for not all children are we concerned about. We are concerned about Black and Latinx kids who are being trapped at home with these parents who we, in the predominant narrative, are going to argue have to be monitored in order to keep their children safe. We can't trust them. So that's kind of part one, is that children are just being kept out of the surveillance of mandated reporters. The second key change was that there was a guidance issued by the State Office of Children and Family Services to both city employees, so CPS, and to private preventive service workers that they should not be conducting unannounced visits and that they should be doing all of their casework remotely wherever they could, in that they were supposed to be going through COVID protocols and assessing for whether there's a risk of COVID before entering the home. So that in and of itself is a huge sea change from the situation where we have all these unannounced visits and reports in the middle of the night. And then finally, we have an order on the family court side that restricted the filing of cases to only cases where ACS was seeking a removal of children from their families, as opposed to cases where ACS was going to otherwise go to court and ask for an order of supervision over a family. And then on existing cases, they were only going to hear emergency motions. So typically requests to either suspend visits or to place a child in foster care in a court-ordered supervision case. I should also note here, these were the directives that were received. I understand on the ground that things didn't always look like this, right? That there were still unannounced visits taking place, that it wasn't always the workers who could be doing things remotely were doing things remotely. And of course, it bears noting that school personnel, even remotely, were still making reports, even in those early days, making reports about children who were missing remote school without access to technology and things like that. And also, I don't want to overlook the immense trauma hardship to families who already had cases in family court who now were stuck in the situation where they didn't have access to judges to change orders for visits and to grant greater access to their children. So I should give this caveat that I am drawing this hopeful message from this period. It also was an awful, awful period for many families, and it only got worse over the last 2 years. So I don't want to in any way kind of overlook that aspect of pain. But if we are looking at then, if these are the three key changes, what did that result in? It resulted in, as I said earlier, the vast reduction of the family regulation system at every stage in the city. So the number of reports received dropped by 43%, the number of cases filed in court by 53%, and the number of children placed in foster care dropped by 46%. So if we are thinking about why the number of reports received dropped so greatly, the number of reports received from mandated reporters in school dropped by 83%. There are other mandated reporter groups who dropped not as significantly, for example, police or social service workers, which I think goes to this fact that we can't ignore how the family regulation system interacts with all of these other systems of policing and surveillance. In that even if you don't have children going to school, you do still have children living in heavily over-policed neighborhoods or children who are living in shelters who are under the purview of mandated reporters there. So even with school shut down, we do still have this sizable body of reporters who are still making these reports. I want to focus particularly, though, on the drop in the number of children who were placed in foster care. And you'll note that the number of children placed in foster care outpaced the drop in the number of reports received. And also, it bears repeating that ACS did still have the power to go to court and request that these children be removed, that they did still have the ability to file those cases. But there were this significant drop in foster care seems to indicate first that ACS itself began assessing more rigorously whether it was in fact going to go to court and request a removal, and it seems to have held off on filing cases where it might previously have sought a removal and have tied its applications more to the legal standard than out of this frustration or anger with parents that might have previously driven filings in court in some cases. Obviously, that still happened to some extent, but if you have to meet this standard and you can't file court-ordered supervision cases, that seems to have compelled ACS to at least assess a bit more rigorously. And then on the other end of things, we also had judges at least initially granting fewer applications even when ACS did request them, which would seem to indicate that judges were paying a bit more attention to this key factor for removal, whether there is harm of the risk of harm to the child would be outweighed by the harm that was going to be enacted by a removal itself. And particularly in this period where if a child was taken from their family, there was no guarantee that they were going to have any visits with their children at all. Judges did seem to be more mindful of the trauma enacted by a removal. This to me seems to show that the ACS claim, the family court claim, that it only had previously used removals as tools of last resort is just not true, in that if we now have this significant drop in the number of removals of children, but we also now, as I'll get to in a moment, have this evidence that there was no change in safety of children, that would seem to show that in past years, we have a huge number of children, hundreds, or if we're going back over the last decade or so, thousands of children who were taken from their family for no reason, who could have stayed at home with their family, and yet the city still removed them and judges still approved of those removals. So I want to jump now to when I say children stayed just as safe, what I am basing that on. And I should note now, when I started my research, I thought perhaps this would be a controversial point to make, but by last summer, ACS itself, through its Commissioner Hansel, he acknowledged at a city council hearing that he too had come to the conclusion that there had been no increase in child abuse or neglect, and that it did not seem that this narrative of children being trapped at home with their abusive or neglectful parents had actually been borne out. So first, there was no increase in child abuse by any number of measures. First, there was a drop in the number of child fatalities reported. And of course, we all know that child fatalities are incredibly tragic and incredibly rare. And yet they also are a type of abuse or neglect that is not likely to escape attention in the way that, something like a child having a dirty home might escape attention, right? If there is a fatality, it will eventually come to someone's attention. And yet over the beginning of the pandemic, the number of fatalities reported dropped by 25%. At the same time, there was no change in the proportion of child abuse to child neglect reports. It kept that same about 15% abuse, 85% neglect rate. And finally, as Commissioner Hansel noted, there was no change in ER admission patterns over the course of the pandemic. At the same time, there was no change in the rate of substantiation for either abuse or neglect reports. So as I said earlier, there were around 65% of reports that are found unfounded, and that's been true going back for any number of years now. So this is particularly noteworthy in that past studies have shown on a national level that where there are fewer reports of child neglect, those reports become more accurate in that the investigations are able to be more thorough. And so the fact that even with fewer reports and fewer investigations, the number of reports substantiated remains steady is particularly noteworthy, in that these are investigations that in theory had even more resources devoted to them. And finally, looking forward now, this is, I guess, the benefit of COVID going on for so long, we also now can say that there has been no kind of observable rebound effect, that even now with children back in school, while the number of reports received has creeped back up to what it was prior to COVID, essentially, there has not been any kind of bubble, any increase in the number of reports as if teachers were reporting abuse or neglect that had gone unnoticed in the last year. And now that they are seeing children again, they have to go back and, record everything that they didn't see before. And in this period as well, there has also been no uptick in substantiation. So it's not as if children have returned to school, teachers have seen all of these valid concerns and now are able to report them, and then those get substantiated out. None of that has been borne out. So I think, I'll take it from the horse's mouth here. As Commissioner Hansel put it, he said there are no indicators of a larger bolus of undetected charges of child abuse or neglect as a result of the pandemic. And bolus is a medical term meaning essentially a mass. So even he agrees that there is no kind of hidden body of child neglect or abuse over the course of COVID. So I realize I'm probably short on time already. So I will just leave us now with a few takeaways in terms of what I see as the lessons of this period. So I didn't really get into this today, but this is also a period where we have had more government assistance to families with fewer strings attached than essentially any other period since the New Deal. So whether we're talking about the stimulus checks, whether we're talking about increased unemployment benefits, now looking at the child tax credit, I don't want to posit any of these as perfect programs. I think they all have too limited of eligibility and too limited of time duration, but they do have the benefit of giving families the autonomy to receive funds and spend funds the way that they would like to, rather than having to go through jumping through the hoops of back to work programs or anything like that, and also doing it fully outside the auspices of the family regulation system. So unlike something like preventive services, where if you're accepting aid from ACS in that sense, you're also accepting ACS into your home to monitor you and police you and to accept X, Y, or Z condition that goes along with that. This is just families getting money to spend as they see fit, much like we already give to, for example, foster parents when they are caring for children. At the same time, we also had this huge growth in mutual aid projects in the communities were not fully, but to a large degree, able to take control of their own redistribution of wealth to some extent and able to aid their neighbors with everything from providing diapers, clothing, provisions like that to each other, as well as services like counseling, childcare, things like that. So all of that, to me, that feels like the path forward. How do we solve child neglect? How do we keep children safe in this country? We give families money. We give families money such that they can keep their own families safe, and such that we are not requiring for the government to come in and police them and say, this is how you need to raise your children. And at the same time, I think also we need to reconsider the role of mandated reporters, and particularly the existence of mandated reporters in school, in that I think that destroys the relationship between parents and their children's school and seems to serve no real benefit. And I think finally, just as broader takeaway, is that as we creep back to the system as we saw it before, I would just urge us all to kind of reject this notion that we need to return to business as usual, and to kind of sit instead with, yes, this has been an awful 2 years for any number of reasons that, you know, I could go on for another 10 minutes about all of those. But there's no reason now to, if we are going to return to a world that looks more like the world that we were in before, that doesn't mean accepting all of these abusive practices of policing that are still continuing to target Black families and poor families and Latinx families and police and surveil them. Instead, we need to move to a future and call for a future where those families are able to care for themselves the same way that all families should be able to. So thank you. And I think, I'm sure I'm already over time, but
thank you.
Questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ahrens. It was fabulous. And you're getting a lot of love in the chat around rejecting business as usual. And thank you for giving us such a quick overview of so much important information about what we can learn from the pandemic. For folks who wrote in the chat, I think there was a few questions about local policies, national policies, which you covered in subsequent sessions. And also some curiosity about data related to the court, related to anonymous reporting. What we're going to do is take all of that and make sure in subsequent sessions or in an email, we'll get out to you that information to make sure that we follow through. We're really going to design subsequent sessions based on what we're hearing today. So with that, we want to allow you to go into small groups to discuss Dr. Ahrens' presentation and other things that from your experience were learned during the pandemic. And we just thank you for the call to action, Dr. Ahrens, and your really wonderful research. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Ahrens, for the wonderful presentation. We're about to go into small groups and to have a conversation regarding the presentation. And the intention is to actually get the diversity of voices and lived experiences and providers into the room. A couple of, I would say, guidelines are, first, welcome all voices. We don't, there's an opportunity to engage, and we know people have opinions. If you're in official capacity or an expert, I suggest that you stay open to the voices of the people in the room. If you're talkative, which some of us are, just lower your pace a little bit, but do participate. Listen to learn is one of our guidelines as well. We want you to have this opportunity to pause and to listen deeply to the different voices and to be in a learning posture and not a judging posture. And then speak from lived experience. There are a variety of people in the room, and we want you to value your own experience, but also speak from your very lived experience and open up into conversation. Be sure as you're responding to the question to go around once, let everyone speak their opinion or comments before you get into a cross-talk type conversation. Chantilly, you want to go over the community care team pieces, or would you like me to do that?
I'd be happy to do that. Thanks, Rich. Hello, everyone. In the chat, you'll see that Nancy has put in some of our courageous conversation practices. I want to alert you that when you move into your breakouts, During the main sessions, the care team is available to you if you private message them. And in the breakouts, we have enough breakouts for the care team to have their own room. So they're going to be in the very first room. Once you open up your breakouts, they're at the very top. So you can find them there, and the room is labeled care team room. And then another piece that I want to point out to support you in your process, you'll see that the small group conversation doc is in a Google Doc. And so let me share my screen so that you see what I'm referring to. If you click on that link, you'll get access to this document that'll guide you through your process. So if there's anything you've forgotten, you're like, this is where you can find it. And it's also going to be in your chat, which will travel with you. So that link will be with you as well. Okay, but the process is here. There should be about 4 people in every breakout. You have 25 to 30 minutes, so be mindful of getting every voice in. And then you will also see the timer at the top and sort of give you a countdown, and we'll also give you a little heads up when you're halfway through. Okay. But the breakouts are ready. Is there anything else, Rich, before we?
Yeah, I just question. The question is, what do these findings bring up for you? How do they inform, confirm, or challenge your experience or understanding of what happened for children and youth and families during COVID? Welcome back, everyone. I hope everyone had an engaged conversation and you were able to voice your thoughts in these small group conversations. We did have some technical challenges, and our team was in the background doing some cooking and jamming with the technical challenges. We're now going to transition to listening to some of the voices. Everyone will have a chance to respond in the chat, but we really wanted to focus on hearing from youth, parent, guardians, and community responders. And so we'd love to have some volunteers just respond to a question. And the question is, from our conversations today and your experience, what is important to lift up about how community takes care of each other? From our conversations today and your experience, what is important to lift up about how community takes care of each other? And so we'd love to start with a youth participant. And if someone will pause for a moment, if anyone wants to volunteer, you would unmute yourself. Everyone else is muted, and you would speak for a few minutes. We have about 10 to 15 minutes for this piece.
Hi, guys. Craig Williams again. I would just like to say thank you to everyone. Growing up in the foster system, it brought a lot of challenges. I'm just very excited to see so many people on one accord and in union with each other, trying to, abolish this child welfare scheme, basically, you know what I mean? Remembering, having to go through courts and all of the, just all of the cycles of the system and stuff like that. It was a lot of negativity. I'm just glad to be here today and to be able to speak to all of you guys now. I'm glad that you guys exist and you guys are on this type of united front. I'm just really happy to be a part of it. I'm glad you guys exist, and I'm going to be here until the wheels fall off. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig, for your participation. Youth, community responder, parent, guardian voices.
Well, I'm going to jump in as a community responder. I'm going to say that this is long waiting, the conversation of how many of these systems have contributed to the trauma and the pain that our communities and our families are facing. We did notice in the juvenile side that there were many discretions being made. So we know that these policies have to be changed, and we know that young people will be young people. In the child welfare system, what I did notice was that the schools, as always, have used ACS and the threat of educational neglect for far too long. You know, we have to, as community folks, stand up and also educate ourselves about how we've also contributed to using these systems for help. And what we've done is open the doors for additional system involvement, where we already also know with data, with outcomes, that for far too long, they've been responsible for wasting millions and millions of dollars with no positive outcomes. Now it's time, because our young people who are amazing took it to the streets and said, no longer, basta ya, no longer you be abusing our families and our communities. So it's time for us to do the work, for communities to get the funding to educate our kids. We want better schools. If systems are investing all these millions of dollars with bad outcomes, then it's time for us to stand up and do the work.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you. We'd like to open it up to hear a couple of more voices. We have a few minutes.
Can I say something? I'm Margaret Julian. I'm a parent's attorney. What I find shocking is that Michigan shooting case that we've all been hearing about for the past 2 weeks. If that child had been of color, or that family, don't you all think that when the child first got in trouble for the drawings, that DCF would have gotten involved, and that child would not have been allowed to stay in that school and probably would have been removed from his parents? But the parents are white and apparently have money.
Thank you, Margaret, for your comments. Other comments?
I'll jump in. As an impacted parent, just recently with an anonymous report that, of course, was substantiated. It just, for me, on the other side, is that when I shared my story, it allowed parents who have been impacted to share theirs. And so I would say, like, the pandemic has been crazy for a lot of us, but it's also given us the space to kind of have this resurgence of community engagement and involvement. And with us sharing more like this, with us having these meetings where most of us can meet in a larger space, it allows people to kind of share more. And the more that we share, the more that we advocate, the more that, you know, parents are fully informed of their rights, all those things, we can definitely have a shift in the system and abolish ACS, because we all know that this is not working. But I feel that the more that we come together as a community from across, you know, the globe, the country, we are able to do this work together. And I think being able to have that opportunity to sit down and sit with what is going on, we can't go back to what was.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. We're still open for comments.
Hi, this is Jacinta Jagas-Ernell. I am a member of PLAN, Parent Legislation Action Network, as well as Vocal New York Civil Rights Union leader. I thank you for this space. I am also multiple system justice impacted. And during the COVID-19, what stands out to me is that my home sanctuary was turned into a home penitentiary. And CPS has did a disservice to my family, where we were not allowed to have a hearing to dismiss this case, but continue to be surveillanced under the guise of false mental health narratives. And in the 24 months, the agency arranged only 5 in-person visitations at a price tag of $300 to $400 a day to demonstrate my love and commitment to my children, where the community collectively had to come together with a 24-hour notice and raise the capital to meet CPS mandates in order for them to not terminate my parental rights or to remove my children falsely and to force the care placement. And I say that because not only do we have to hold CPS accountable for accountability, transparency, and integrity, family court also has to be responsible for perpetuating systemic injustice, structural oppression, and perpetuating false court reports in which parents are not aware they are entitled to a court order, a court transcript, and an opportunity to submit an affidavit of opposition. However, the monies are not invested in the respondent, where we have the opportunity to object to the Article 10, in which I term the Article 10 Jim Crow, where we're separate but equal parenting plans. There are 3 tiers of the court system: the rabbinical court for the Jews, the divorce, separated, and custody battles, and then there's the Article 10, where CPS creates ex parte custody and visitation agreements that is not presented in front of the judge to accept it, but create junk sci-fi parental assessments to then use that intel to create counter-parenting plans to keep your children longer languishing under the court dependency and not reunify parents and children under whole family reunification and identifying our children to choose between parents, which one they will love to be with and which one they don't. This is inhumane, it is cruel, and it is about creating broken homes. As a mother, I am now asked to pay child support, custody visitation, and $1,000 a week, which exceeds my income, to purely demonstrate my ability to be a mother. So is it demonstrating my ability to be a mother, or is it the real question, how CPS is bankrupting our family and putting us in impoverished conditions? Thank you.
Thank you, Jacinta, for your comments. I'd just like to we want some more comments, but just 30-second pause. There have been a lot of deep emotions, truths, and comments made about the system and experiences. Thank you so much for all your comments. 30 seconds, just take a deep breath.
Well, hi, I'll comment if I may. My name, you can see my name, but I'm Barbara, and I'm a court-appointed special advocate, or CASA. Probably most of you are familiar with that. I just wanted to say overall, I found Anna's findings, I don't even know what the right word is, but really important. And I think if they're shared with people in power and authority, they can have, or they should have a major impact, I hope. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, on our whole child welfare system, and perhaps ACS in particular, which clearly is highly flawed, if not worse. I think anecdotals are very important, and they should accompany any data report. But I think the numbers, the data, it speaks volumes about how flawed the system is. And I'd just like to thank Anna for her report. And I'm looking forward to having a copy of it where I can mark it up and highlight it. I hope some people on this call have access to people in power who will read it and take the information in.
Thank you, Barbara. Anyone want to make a final comment? We have a few minutes for one comment.
I would just like to say the parallels between the mass incarceration or the criminal justice system and the family policing system have such uncanny parallels that, to me, proves this system does nothing more than protect children from success.
Thank you, Joyce. Any final comments? We want to take as much as possible during this brief period.
Um, Hi, I'm Tara Graves. I'm from the Center for Family Representation. I'm an impact parent. And one of the thoughts that I have just listening to everyone who were speaking was just how powerful the system is. And unfortunately, it is not a system that is working its way out of families' lives. It's doing more to implement more systems to create problems. Whenever I'm at a conference and I'm working with a parent that identifies as a parent who was a child in foster care, that's just proof of what this system really is meant to do. It's to create funding for generational gain for other people who do not look like us. And that is the problem. When you are working with a family, if that family needs assistance, you provide that family with assistance. There are no saviors in the system at all. You're not saving anyone from anything, because if they were, the system would look completely different. So I really do think that the communities have the answers. They just do not have the funding and they don't have the support. And when you have a system who's going to dictate who can be in your life and what they can do in your life, they're already dismantling your support system. They're already dictating who you can have there to support your family and what support looks like. And that is not a system that is going to get us out of where we need to be at to be successful, because it's not just about surviving anymore. And that's why I love this younger generation. It's not about surviving. It's about saying we're not going to take this anymore. And we are going to be in better positions than we were before. So I do believe that the beginning of these conversations are the start. And I agree with everyone who said that we cannot go back. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. So we had this wonderful opportunity to hear the voices of a variety of folk on the screen, lived experience, and people in the field as well. And now the working group, I'm transitioning, the working group wants to hear your response overall to this conversation today. And Chantilly is going to put up a link in the chat. It's a Mentimeter app, and you can respond to the question in the chat. And if the link doesn't work for you, you can respond in the chat itself. The question, we'll also email all the information to you as well. The question is, as a result of our conversations today, what are the 1 to 3 things we want to lift up from this conversation? As a result of our conversations today, what are the 1 to 3 things we want to lift up from this conversation?
Great. So Mentimeter is going to collate our responses. So you see this on your screen. You won't be able to type into it just yet. There should be in the chat the link. And so it'll lead you here. And so I'm going to stop my share. So you all can head over to that and just type in. There's only 250 characters, so it's a short answer. But as a result, what needs to be lifted up. And so we can capture that. And then the hosting team and the working group will also share a little bit on how some of these responses will be used. But head over to that Menti. I'll give a few minutes. I'll play some music a little bit just to give us a little breather. And then in probably about 3 to 4 minutes, I'll show the live responses and scroll through them so you can read what folks are saying. And just to also let you all know that this is anonymous. So your names will not be captured in here. So that also is going to be helpful to know.
Wow, that was powerful. Whoa. We're at the final phase of our presentation today, and this information will be emailed to you as well. So you'll have it to review as participants. I'd like to bring on Anne.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm going to start our closing. I'm not going to be doing all of the closing. First of all, on behalf of the Narrowing the Front Door Work Group, I would like to thank you all for your time today. I know how precious it is. There's so little of it. So when you give it or share it with others, we want to appreciate it. Thank you for participating in this conversation that is difficult. We take it so seriously, and so we know that when we work to close the door in the name of so-called protecting children, this is going to be hard work. And so we are thankful for your willingness to come to this in a full way, in an authentic way today. I know that that's not always easy. We are really grateful for the parents and the youth and the community members that are here today, and to help us reclaim that narrative about what true support for families really looks like. To remind folks, as it was said today, we've never needed saviors. We've needed supports. We've never needed judgments. We've needed jobs so that we could protect our children. And we certainly never need, our children don't need to be protected from us. What they do need to be protected from is a system that is systemically racist and which continues to tell them that they are marginalized and oppressed, and then wonders why we don't want to get help from them, right? We want to say that that's why we're angry. That's why we won't go back. That's why this work is so important. I used to tell the folks that I work with, you can't say that you love children and then hate their parents. That just doesn't make any sense. We are going to move towards healing and hope, because those of you who know me know how important that is to me, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to step away or that we should step away from our anger. I don't know about you, but my pain reminds me of the healing work that I have to do. I bear witness to my pain because it reminds me of that soul work, the healing work, the justice work that needs to be done. And it leads me. But I'm going to hold on to that skepticism because I know it protects us. It protects us, and it has protected my people for generations and generations as we push forward for change. We've said it here, we won't go back, and we won't ask for permission to continue to be treated with humanity. We're just going to continue to march forward. I want to thank you all for that work, and for those of you that want to join us in this work. The planning committee today, I know that we had their names written somewhere, but I want to call their names out loud because they are the people that spent time thinking about this and bringing us together. Angela Burton, Erica Francois, Hope Newton, Jarrell Melendez, Joyce McMillan, Julia Davis, Nora McCarthy, Sarah Childs, Tarek Ishmael, Ron Richter, Tricia Stevens, Shirley Gabel Gattino, Emma Kettering, Dominique Jones, and Jess Danhauser. Thank you to all of you for the work and the time that you brought to us today. Someone said to me, the simplicity of this format is powerful. We didn't need a whole lot of people talking at us. We needed some time to talk to each other, to plan, to strategize as we move forward. I want to thank the Redlick Horowitz Foundation for their vision for this and for approaching some of us and asking us to put this together. Of course, I want to thank my colleagues at Fordham Graduate School of Social Services and our great facilitators today, Kelly and Rich from What's Next Now, and Chantilly, and all of the people behind the scenes who helped us with the technology. Now, in this moment, in this season, as we move into this new year, I want to hope and bring you hope and wish you peace and love for your families, and hope that you'll join us as we move on to our next session and add on to this in January. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jarrell Melendez, to just give us a couple of reminders as we close out. Thank you all.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jerome Melendez. I work at Lawyers for Children as the Youth Advocate Coordinator. Thank you so much, Anne, for, thank you, Anne, for introducing me. And I also want to thank you all for being here today. I can honestly say my heart is so full, and I learned a lot from all of you. So thank you for just being here and showing up and showing out and speaking the authentic truth. It means a lot. My former foster youth self, little Jarrell, appreciates that. So thank you. All right. So a few things we want you to be aware of. The first thing, we will be dropping a link to the survey in the chat. So please take some time to fill it out. I know some people are like, you know what? Today was so much. I need a pause. And I want to do it later. It would also be emailed to you. So no pressure if you can't do it right now. We understand. We got you. And it will help us. Please take the time to fill it out, because honestly, the planning committee, it will help us plan the next 3 sessions. So please fill it out. All right. Thank you. Now, the next 3 sessions will be on Wednesdays, because I know some of us, we hear dates and they like, wait, is it Monday, Tuesday? It's Wednesdays, okay? The next 3 will be January 19th, sorry. Wednesday, January 19th, Wednesday, January 26th, and Wednesday, February 9th from 10 to 12. Please put it in your calendars, put the reminder. We would love to have you all back. I'm gonna be looking, I'm gonna be checking, so please come back. All right, all right, I know we all wanna know, what's the next discussion? What's the next session, right? Because I wanna know. Well, I'm able to tell y'all. The next session will be titled, How Does the Money Flow? Right? We really want to unpack that, right? We really want to know the discussion of the finances and funding of child welfare and explore ways to use those funds less for family regulation and more for family support. So come and join us. Let's unpack that. Let's have these discussions. So come on to that, please, and thank you. Lastly, but definitely, you know, right now my head is spinning. There was a lot shared. And I think it would be helpful if we all just put a word in the chat at this time, right? So any word that you want us to walk away with, put it in the chat. I know Anne is going to join me in reading some out loud. We may not get to all your words, so please don't come after me if I don't say your word or if Anne don't say your word.
Okay, I see some, Jarrell. Let's see. Encourage, determined, thankful, love, just love, gratitude.
Power.
Love. Go ahead.
Yeah, power, change, community. I'm seeing community several times.
Momentum, motivated.
Inspired, strengthen numbers.
Defund.
All right.
Cathartic. I see that. That's a good one. Cathartic.
Yes, thank you. Motivated.
I got more love. I always want more love. Abolish.
I
Dignity.
love love. Yes, support system, voices. Love, love, love.
Thank you, Dominique. Movement.
Yes, love, care, power,
compassion. Black families matter.
Yes, Black families matter.
Beautiful. Okay, you can keep
Human
on.
right work, rise. Okay,
Yep.
I think We read out a lot of words. We tried to get to the ball. I know some we missed. Like I said, don't judge, you know. They were coming fast. So I appreciate y'all. They're still coming up. But at this time, I have the privilege of turning it over to a parent because, you know, we heard from us, we heard from young person. Now let's hear from a parent. Let a parent really share a poem with us. So Miss Washington, I get to turn it over to you, my dear, to close us out.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm so honored to be here with you all this morning. And here is, I'm just gonna jump right into my poem. I am a Black woman, descendant of stolen Africans enslaved here in America. I am a survivor of multiple systems designed to dehumanize and kill me. I am a person who has had to mother myself and my community. I am a mother mothering on the margins. I am a microphone built by pain. I am the sound of healing and the vibration of change, raising social consciousness while disrupting systems of harm and shame. I am the rhythm of my ancestors' heartbeat. I am their vivid, wildest dream. I am an organizer, activist, and advocate for reproductive justice, working to keep families intact, safe, happy, healthy, and thriving. What I respect is humanity. I am a part of a generation of Black women dancing to a melody of liberation. I am Halima Washington. Thank you.